Welcome, listeners and viewers. Thank you for joining More to the Story today. We're doing a little bit different. This is More to the Story with Molly White, but Molly will not be joining us today. She has had a death in her family, so we won't see her today. But we have a guest co-host, and that guest co-host is Tracy Reynolds. You'll see her here in a little bit. But we did want to do a shout out to Holtze Health and Wellness, who is our sponsor, one of our sponsors. And if you'd like to sponsor us, log on to operationoutcry.org and indicate that you have a donation for More to the Story. And we thank you for that. So I do want to introduce Tracy Reynolds. She works at the Justice Foundation and has for a number of years. And Tracy, can you join us?
To be a co-host with you on More to the Story. I've known Mary for together almost every day, and I'm actually part of the production team for More to the Story, and book the guests such as Amy on this program. So it's great to actually be with, and we are excited about our show today. Mary's going to introduce Amy, but I will say 13 years, we've had lots of adventures, so I'm really happy to have her on the program.
Thank you, Tracy, for being on with me today. And we are excited about Amy. And before we bring her in, we do want to give our sort of trigger warning that there'll be some content today about the story of an abortion. And if you have abortion in your past, or you have helped someone with an abortion, or maybe you haven't even considered much about abortion, but if today something is said that causes you to have an emotional reaction, you can call the H3 helpline at 866-721-7881, or you can log on to operationoutcry.org, and you will find healing resources, abortion recovery resources at either one of those, in either one of those ways. So we are excited about Amy Thomison. She is in the Army and has been a Black Hawk helicopter crew chief. And when she served, she was the only woman that was a battalion crew chief at the time. And we will hear more from Amy about her time in the military. Amy has abortion in her past, so we'll hear about that. And she has done prison ministry. So we have all kinds of things to talk about with Amy today. Please welcome Amy Thomison.
Hello.
There she is. Welcome, Amy. Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about your experience in the Army?
Oh, I joined, I served, I went to Germany. I was in a VIP unit, so we flew generals and dignitaries. We used to fly Vice President Gore in London. We flew the Russian president. We flew Hootie and the Blowfish and Dr. Alex Trebek. We got to fly some big names.
Hootie and the Blowfish, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good, huh? Now, you sent us some information about you, and you are from Missouri, aren't you, Amy?
I am from Missouri.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. It's a little town southeast.
Well, I am in Missouri, born and raised here, and I am living in Jefferson City. So I thought, oh, this is one of my people, and I didn't even know
I've got relatives there. That's a great place.
Mm-hmm. So tell me how, or one of you, Amy or Tracy, tell me how the two of you met.
Well, we actually met through our dear friend, Lavette Vassar, and Lavette has been on More to the Story as a guest before, and she and Amy have worked together, and Mary, Amy will talk about that, I'm sure, after she tells us her testimony, but yeah, Amy and I have been on a retreat. We've told stories sitting in rocking chairs on a deck in Round Top, Texas, and we actually have a mutual love for football, so we call each other during football games. So I'm so excited. I haven't seen her in person in a while, and I know, Amy, that you've told your abortion story before. Actually, we filmed it on a couple of occasions. So I'd love for you to just kind of tell a little bit about that, and then how it led you to kind of meet Lavette and get involved in the recovery area.
All right. I met Livette through a friend, and we had been talking about things, and she said, I have a lady you need to meet. Um, Livette met me at my friend's house. We sat outside. She told me her story, made it easy for me to open up and tell her about my story. I went to a retreat with them, got some healing from abortion, and that really just propagated my volunteering with the abortion recovery ministry.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit, if you can, Amy, about your abortion story, and then we can kind of get into the recovery piece.
So I was sexually assaulted by my best friend's brother. And somewhere along the lines, it became everything about them and not the baby. Abortion was the only way to go. He could go to jail because I had been raped by him. And so they didn't really want me to talk about the story. They didn't want me to tell anything. They didn't want me to have the baby. You know, somewhere along the lines, I had no idea that there was help out there. My best friend at the time had had 4 abortions. So she never said, hey, you have a choice. You have to do this because my brother's not going to go to jail. It was kind of, I felt very forced. Didn't know what I was doing at the time. Didn't have any idea the effects it would have on the rest of my life. Had no idea that I would be volunteering to try to help others find God's love after. And would have like laughed you out of the room if you told me I'd be inside prison doing prison ministry. But that's where we ended up. Once I went on the healing retreat, it was called Rachel's Vineyard. And it was an abortion healing retreat. I was hooked. Like I found a good start to my next volunteering career. I think my time in the Army, seeing the things that I saw with some of the hurt people, inspired me to want to help others. And when I fell into this ministry, I fell in love with it.
Hey, Amy,
Yeah,
before we talk about Rachel's Vineyard, I'm just kind of going back to your story. Wow, you must have felt so alone and like nobody supported you. It was like you had to make that decision for them rather than what you wanted to do. So it sounds like you were pretty abandoned, and that everybody told you, oh, you need to have this abortion. Is that kind of accurate?
that is very accurate. You know, I lived with this family. I worked with this family. And so it wasn't about me at all. It was all about them and what was wanted. Um, and that's what I was told I had to do, basically. And again, like I said, I didn't know that there was Hope Pregnancy Centers. I didn't know that there was other places out there to go get help from until I went to the Rachel's Vineyard retreat. And then I learned that there's all this other help out there. And I had been seeking God for a long time. I was pretty sure he hated me. I thought I hated him because of things that had happened in my life. But I really learned that God's forgiveness was greater than anything that I'd been through.
That's great.
So,
And did you come to that through Rachel's Vineyard?
Ultimately, it led me to that. I would say that I was seeking God again. You know, I had been with God when I was younger in my life. Um, that absolutely introduced me to a core of people who had Christ in their life and believed that you could have a relationship with him and not just be around. And that introduced me to people who basically said, there's a better way. And so I found my way back to Christ after the retreat. And things have just been rocking and rolling since then.
That's great. And so, what was it like? We'll get into your prison ministry, but what was it like serving on your first team in Rachel's Vineyard with Lavette and the gang?
You know, it was an absolute honor. And you keep hearing that. Livette would say, you know, we're just here along for the ride. We just want to, you know, watch the story. And I didn't really understand that till my first time volunteering. And I think just to see how much hurt is out there and how much comfort they can get for being around people with the like stories who had the, you know, we all have different stories, but ultimately they're all kind of the same in that place, in that darkness that we were in. And so to see just absolute transformation. You know, some of the ladies that we saw, some of the men that we saw that came through retreat walked in the first day with their head down, disparaged, wasn't going to talk to anybody. Some of them had their arms crossed, you know, like, you're not going to get anything out of me kind of attitude. And to see the absolute transformation, you know, by the end of the retreat, they were smiling. One lady put her cane up and was walking around the shop. I mean, it was pretty amazing. My first retreat just absolutely sealed my deal. Just made me want to just do it more. So,
Amy, I have a question for you, and that is if there was something that drove you to recognize that you needed some healing for your abortion experience, or if you just, how did you come to that decision?
um, you know, I hadn't really talked about it outside of the family that I had lived with. Um, and I met some lady at church, and she knew that I was seeking, and she kept inviting me over to her house, and we met through a Bible study. And during the Bible study, I just said that things had happened in my life and that I'd lost a child. And she was like, "Really? I know somebody you need to meet." And you know, honestly, Livette will tell you, I was nervous when I first was meeting her. I even found a puppy in the street on the way over to their house. And I'm like, "Oh, I can't talk to you. I have to rescue this puppy." And so my friend put the puppy in the bathroom so that I could sit outside and talk to Livette. And
Oh,
I'm telling
we're
you, the
gonna
way
let,
that she told her story just led me into absolute trust. You know, for her to open and share gave me the opportunity to open and share. And it's just word of mouth. I mean, it was just people helping people.
Amy, I want to underscore that because Tracy and I and Molly, who's not with us today, but we all are aware about the power of telling our stories, and you are too, aren't you? So
Yes,
I
I
just,
am now.
you are now. So for our listeners out there, what would you tell someone that has abortion in their past that hasn't yet found their voice or hasn't gone through healing?
You know, I think back to some of the people that have gone through the retreats, and had they told anybody in their family, there might have been one more child saved. You know, telling your story, I joke because I was on the retreat. I told Livette, you know, I'm going to cross my arms and say, "My name is Amy. I had an abortion, and that's my story." And that's all I was going to share. I was dead set that I wasn't going to do it. And I really kind of felt God talking to me. And then you share your story in the retreat, and then you talk about it again kind of at the end of the retreat. You have like this wonderful ceremony for honoring the children that are not with us anymore. And I think in that I told it again the second time, and Livette was like, "Oh my gosh, you've told it twice now." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not telling anybody." But then I was like, you know, if God really forgives, like, do I have to be embarrassed? Do I have to hide it? And I would just say that telling your story, you know, the enemy keeps us in secrets, and the secrets keeps us in bondage. Absolutely. And I was so fearful of telling the story that anybody would figure out who it was and it would get back to other people. I was even afraid like I would lose my job because of it. And I realized that the power wasn't there once I talked about it. That hold on me wasn't there once I talked about it. And my discomfort one time in sharing among strangers, and then learning to volunteer and being asked to repeat my story sometimes for the next set of participants, has made it so much easier. I'm not ashamed. And if it can help anybody, I'm willing to tell it a million times if I have to. So,
That's great, Amy. And I know you have some stories to tell us about prison ministry with taking Rachel's Vineyard into prison. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about, and maybe any of the stories that stand out when you were doing this in prison?
oh, so prison was a new beast. You had to do training. Rachel's Vineyard at the time wasn't in prison. And so Livette had talked to Teresa Burke, who was the author of Rachel's Vineyard. And Teresa was amazing. She said, you know, do whatever you have to do to the program in the prison to get it in the prison. So there are things that we had to learn to make changes for. In prison, you can't carry in a rock and say, pass this rock and say this rock is heavy. You can't take a rock in. So the first time we learned, we had to crush up some paper and pretend that it was a rock. Several times we had instances where we didn't have water, and some of our exercises had water. And so we made do with like water bottles, and we took some flowers out of a vase and we made the vase hold the water. One time, one of the stories where we wrapped bindings around people in a Lazarus exercise, the guards that day wouldn't let us take the bindings in, even though they're loose and they were approved. They were on the chaplain's list. So we ran to the bathroom, got some toilet paper, and that became our simulated. So prison was so interesting and difficult because we had to be out of the box thinkers in order to make it work the way that we needed to work.
Were the people in prison different than the ones that you met at Rachel's Vineyard? Were the stories different?
The stories were kind of the same, but you think about, like, if abortion is 1 in 3 women on the outside, inside, we're in the ladies' murder unit. It was where we were working. It's almost one every other person in there has had an abortion, and it has a lot to do with sexual trauma. It has a lot to do with drugs and drinking. So they weren't any different. I would almost say that they're a little bit more hungry. In the outside, when we do a retreat, people are free to talk. In the prison, there was some hesitancy at first for the ladies to talk because everything you say can be used against you within those walls later on. And so it almost became like they were hungry to talk to us and tell their story because they knew our time was limited. We were supposed to get 2 hours, but by the time you did the body checks and made your way into the prison, by the time they called the offenders out to come meet you, sometimes we would only get like an hour. And then it didn't matter if we started late. We had to end when we were ended. They didn't have enough prison guards. And so one time, instead of meeting in the chapel for us to meet, they put us in the death row building. And in death row, we were locked in a building, locked inside of a room inside of the building, and you could literally see death row, giant letters up above you when we were sitting there. And I have to say that that's probably one of my favorite memories because it's the time in the retreat process that we were doing where your sorrows kind of turn into meeting your children. And in the middle of death row, like, God blessed us. I've got goosebumps thinking about it again. We had 2 chairs serving as our table because we didn't even have a table in there. Of course, there's no guards. And I don't know that I've ever really been scared of the ladies. I can take care of myself, but I know even the other ladies that were with us just felt this peace. And to see death row and to see God come into that room, and the participants met their children in a meadow during a story was amazing. Just blew me away that in the middle of death, God could bring life so vividly. It was something that I'll take to my grave remembering. Just love that.
Wow. And what was it like? You talked about the transformation in Rachel's Vineyard outside of prison. What was it like at the end of Rachel's Vineyard within the prison in terms of the behavior and the trust level of the inmates?
It's pretty crazy. In some of the units, they're allowed to hug, but because we're in the, what's quote the murder unit, we weren't allowed to touch them. We weren't allowed to hug them. And we even, I will tell you this, there was an amazing guard. Several of them were amazing. We had one guard that prayed the house down with us because she was with us on the final day. She got to see our service that we had for the ladies. The ladies that we were ministering to had super huge smiles on their faces. And we just looked at the guard and we said, we've been in here almost 12 weeks now, once a week for 12 weeks in order to do what we do in a day and a half on the outside. But they were so joyed to just give us hugs, tell us how much it had meant to them, begged us to come back in and do it again. And then our wait list grew. from our first time in prison, where we had 50 people that were on our wait list, and we could only do like 12 at a time. And as we kept going in, not only were the offenders changed, but even the guards were like, hey, we've been noticing these ladies are coming into your program and they are so much better on the outside of this program. Like, what's this about? So we've had a chance to even minister to some of the prison guards, male and female, about what we're in there for, what we're promoting healing for, about spreading God's word. I mean, it really has blossomed, and I really think that God is showing us favor by being in there. And I will also say, I look forward to every retreat that we have, inside or outside. But I know when Monday's coming that I'm going to see my ladies in white inside the prison, and it just, I smile. Like almost all of us that volunteer in there, it just is so different because they are so ready to get help, and it's such a different program. Talking about abortion inside a prison, where we're all considered murderers. Well, I consider myself a murderer too. I killed God's child, and so I'm just like them. We're just one step different. And they got caught at something and they're inside behind bars, and I didn't get caught at something and I'm not, but we're the exact same people. And so I think that's amazing. And I think that the ladies that we minister to inside a prison and outside, but inside, absolutely treasure our time with us. If there's a week that we have to skip because sometimes they have lockdowns, we showed up one time for our last day, and we always do a feast on the last day, and we had all this food bought, and the prison had gone on lockdown like 2 hours before we showed up. So we had all this food for the ladies, and we couldn't even go in with it to bring it to them. So we went out to a picnic table, we prayed, and we just fellowshipped with us as our volunteers together. And then we had to rebuy the food the next week to take it back in again. So there's a lot of planning that really has to go into prison. There's a lot of planning that goes into the retreats on the outside. But like even in prison, even people that had murdered people could still find God's love, much less just anything else that they had done. And, healing is like, I always say that our retreats are just a beginning. It's a catalyst to propel you to start forward with your journey. And the ladies are so receptive. Now we have ladies that volunteer with us inside of prison. We call them our ladies in white. We usually have 1 or 2 volunteers for each time that we go in for the session.
Okay, Amy, I have a question. So are you
Uh-huh.
saying then after the women in prison have gone through healing, then they become some of your volunteers? Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
yes,
Okay. I
absolutely.
thought that's what you were saying. I just wanted to be sure I understood that.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Wow.
we take turns, we switch some of them out, but they help. And after we do the retreat, we also do a Bible study. And so we've also had the ladies that have gone through the program. Some of them come back and even help us within the Bible studies. And we've given them like week 1 or week 2 or week 3, and they do their own preparing for it. And so we're there to help them help others, and spreading your word, telling your story. They're not so guarded anymore once they go through the program. And I can't even imagine being in prison and how you would guard everything about your life that you don't want people to know because of vulnerability. Anything can make you look weak. And that has not been what we have seen. It's just really been amazing.
Wow.
Amy, I want to thank you, and I just want to acknowledge just your heart for service, your heart being in the military, and you didn't take a cushy job in the military. I mean, are you still in the Army?
No, I'm not. I got out of the Army, and
Okay,
but
okay.
yeah, there was a lot of situations in the Army that were, I say that I must have God's favor because I should have been dead like 10 times over, with Army service and other things too. So it's pretty, but I really think that seeing some of the unfortunate people and children in the Army is what really started showing me that there was something greater that I wanted to do other than just be in the Army.
Yeah. And God
So,
definitely had a plan for you, and you're still working it, which is great. And I know you like to play golf, and Obviously, we talked about football. So, Amy just got married a few years ago, got a great husband.
Yes.
So,
I did. I did. He's
so
pretty amazing. He said when I got married, I was working cybersecurity after I got out of the Army, and it was really stressful. Um, my husband, when we got married, said, "Why don't you pick something you want to do for fun?" So I was like, all right. So I started working at a golf course because I thought if you work at a golf course, you get free golf. But what it really allowed me to do was have the time to volunteer, to be able to go in the prisons on Mondays or Monday nights, to be able to do those things, and to be able to have the support of my husband, who helps me pack when we do retreats. He helps me load things in my vehicle. We have lights and boxes and stuff and microphones and speakers. And he's really been an amazing support um, for everything that I've done through this volunteer work. And I started volunteering in 2013 with Rachel's Vineyard. And we were together then. We weren't married yet, but he even supported me way back when. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I think
Great
that's
guy.
a beautiful story of that support, and also just to the testament of the fact that you've got your own healing, and then what you've been able to do, and how you've been able to enter into a loving relationship, and you are able to give back the hope. When you're talking about, Amy, when you're talking about going into the prisons, I can just see your face light up, and I can just imagine the hope as you describe the transformation for the women. I guess
Oh,
I didn't
absolutely.
know, I didn't know that the statistics would be like 50, you're talking 50% maybe within the prison system, at least on death row, which
Yes,
is a
ma'am.
really significant percentage. And I'm just wondering for our listeners out there, what you have seen in terms of what is some of the aftermath of abortion that we may not always recognize. If someone's listening today and they have abortion in their past, or they know someone that has abortion in their past, what kind of things might they look for? Because they might want to tell them about your story. They might want to tell them about the hope and healing that's available. And so, what kind of symptoms or consequences have you seen women address in this aftermath of abortion?
It's almost like, they say cancer is the silent killer, but abortion can be too. It just kills the spirit. Um, a lot of the people have shame, and then they hide it, and then that multiplies, and then they do drugs or they drink. They deal with coping measures that are not the way we should cope. Um, I would think, though, like little things, shying away from when you see a baby on TV. Some of those things are some of the things that participants have told us about, or the little things that creep in. Or we had one lady who said that she had, one abortion, and then she really found out that she'd really, since she had self-medicated and started drugs, she had miscarriages. Those are kind of like self-induced abortions. And to know that there's hope and healing out there for that is amazing. Some of the ladies used abortion as the pill after kind of thing. They would, one lady came and she didn't even know how many abortions her and her husband had had. And at the end of the retreat, they realized they had had 11 abortions. And that was one of the retreats where we had abortion people and we had miscarriage people in the same retreat. And you would think that those two wouldn't coincide together, but it actually was cathartic for both of them to talk. I wanted a child and you gave up 9, 10, 11 of them. And it was all worked out in the end. So, I mean, there's nothing too great that's horrible. You still can get healing, whether you've had one, none, miscarriage, or 20 abortions. One lady that we dealt with didn't know that she was affected by it. She was living in Mexico with her mother. Her mother was performing abortions, and when she was 6 years old, her mother would have her open the door, greet the ladies, and bring them in. And when she was young, she didn't know what she was doing. as an adult, like it hit her hard when she realized that she had helped hundreds of ladies have abortions. So the story is not just for the people who have had abortions. We had one participant come through whose mother was gonna abort them, but because of a sexually transmitted disease, they weren't allowed to. And that person came through our retreat and was angry, like, who gave you the right to try to take my life? And
Oh,
to see where he's at now, you know, serving God, doing good things. Like abortion touches everybody,
Yeah,
sisters, mothers. I know that if
absolutely.
Lavette
And I
told her,
think one of the things I've heard, Amy, is that in prison, sometimes abortion is the beginning of their downward spiral that ended them up in prison, either for drugs or either because, you know, they
yeah,
got over angry and killed somebody or whatever it was. But abortion sometimes was the beginning of that
right,
spiral.
right.
So it's awesome now that they have gotten healing, and I love the fact that some of them go back and are now, helping heal, their fellow sisters in prison. That's awesome.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
and
I
to see them grow, to see them come into where they, you know, are sitting there and they're kind of cold and aloof to, you know, 12 months later, they're in there, they're helping, they're leading prayers with us. They're talking to participants when we leave, you know, we're only there for 2 hours. So the ladies that we have help are kind of like this hidden help that stays with the participants throughout the weeks that we're there. So that's pretty amazing too. I mean, even in prison, you can give back and help. It's just crazy.
that's
that is such, I love that redemption story, Amy. I love that. And we are getting to the close of our time. I guess I'd like to ask Tracy if she had any other questions for you, Amy.
Well, thanks, Mary. No, I just am so delighted that you could be on and that we got to be on with you. And I look forward to seeing you around Texas, Amy. And keep up the good work. You are awesome and an inspiration.
Well, you're one of my inspirations myself, Miss Tracy.
Yes. Thank you for your service in the military, Amy, and thank you for your service to women. And
My
I guess
pleasure.
I want to ask you if there's anything we didn't ask you that you think is important for our listeners to hear. Anything else you would want to say?
Um, you know, whether you choose to share your story or not, it's God's story in the end. And whether you tell them 2 months out of the retreat or 2 years after the retreat or 20, telling your story can still help somebody else find healing and forgiveness for what they went through. And so it doesn't really matter. At some point, God's going to use everything that we did for bad for good. And that's what he did in my case. And that's what I see happening through all of the people that we're helping.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amy, for being on today. Thank you for the good work that you're doing. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. We hope you have been lifted today as you've heard these stories. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Same here.